Most people would have walked away after 15 minutes. But on Christmas Eve, one man waited nearly an hour for a woman he had never met. Emily Carter glanced at the glowing numbers on her dashboard and felt her stomach sink. 7:58 p.m. She was supposed to arrive at the restaurant at 7 o'clock. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel as holiday lights blurred past her windshield. This was a mistake. A complete mistake. She should have canceled. She should have turned around and gone home. No reasonable person would still be waiting. Earlier that evening, everything that could go wrong had gone wrong. Her 6-year-old daughter Lily had suddenly started feeling sick after dinner, and Emily spent nearly 40 minutes making sure the little girl was comfortable before calling her neighbor, Mrs. Reynolds, who had kindly agreed to stay with her. Then, as if the universe wanted to test her patience one last time, Emily discovered one of her tires was nearly flat. By the time she found a gas station and dealt with the problem, precious minutes had slipped away. Every red light seemed determined to hold her longer. Every delay felt personal. The blind date had been arranged by a co-worker who insisted she needed to start living again. Emily had laughed when she first heard the idea. Between raising Lily alone, paying bills, and working full-time, romance felt like something that belonged to another version of her life. But eventually she agreed. One dinner, one evening, one chance. Now she was arriving almost an hour late. The restaurant appeared ahead, wrapped in warm Christmas lights and decorated with evergreen garlands. Families and couples moved in and out of the entrance carrying shopping bags and laughing together. Emily parked, checked her reflection in the mirror, and immediately regretted it. A few loose strands of blonde hair had escaped her simple hairstyle, and exhaustion lingered beneath her eyes. She looked exactly how she felt. Tired, uncertain, ordinary. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out into the cold December air and walked toward the entrance. Her heart pounded harder with every step. The hostess smiled politely as Emily entered. The restaurant buzzed with holiday energy. Soft Christmas music played overhead. Glasses clinked. Conversations blended into a comforting hum. Emily scanned the room once, expecting disappointment. She imagined an empty table and a polite explanation that her date had left long ago. Honestly, she wouldn't have blamed him. Then her eyes stopped. Near the large front window sat a man in a dark navy coat. A candle flickered on the table in front of him. One untouched place setting remained across from his seat. He wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't looking annoyed. He simply sat there quietly, gazing at the snowfall outside. Waiting. Emily froze. For a moment she wondered if she was mistaken. Then the hostess leaned toward her and smiled. "Are you Emily?" she asked softly. Emily nodded. "Your date is still here." Still here. The words echoed in her mind. The man looked up at that exact moment. Their eyes met across the room. And for reasons she couldn't explain, Emily suddenly felt as if this Christmas Eve was about to change everything. Emily stood frozen for a second before forcing herself to move. Every instinct told her to apologize immediately, but somehow that did not feel like enough. The man rose from his chair as she approached, offering a calm smile that seemed surprisingly genuine. He looked to be in his late 30s, tall, well-dressed without appearing flashy, and completely at ease despite the fact that she had kept him waiting for nearly an hour. "Emily?" he asked. His voice was warm and steady. "Yes," she replied, feeling embarrassed. "I am so sorry. I know this is unbelievable, but everything that could go wrong tonight actually did." To her surprise, he pulled out her chair and waited until she sat down. "Then it sounds like you had a rough evening," he said. "I am glad you made it safely." Emily blinked. That was not the reaction she expected. Most people would have been annoyed. Some would have left. Instead, this stranger seemed more concerned about her drive than the lost time. "You are not upset?" she asked before she could stop herself. A faint smile crossed his face. "I would rather know what happened than assume the worst." The answer lingered in her mind as they settled into conversation. His name was Ethan Brooks. Aside from that, he revealed very little about himself. When the server arrived, Ethan suggested she order whatever she wanted and encouraged her not to rush. Slowly, Emily felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. She told him about the tire problem, about Lily feeling sick earlier in the evening, and about how close she had come to canceling altogether. Ethan listened carefully, not with the polite attention people often pretended to give, but with real interest. It had been a long time since Emily felt truly heard. Outside the window, Snowflakes drifted through the glow of streetlights. Inside, the restaurant felt increasingly cozy. Their conversation moved naturally from holiday traditions to favorite childhood memories. Emily found herself laughing more than she expected. At one point, she even forgot how nervous she had been. Ethan spoke about growing up in a small town and how Christmas had always been important in his family. There was something thoughtful about the way he chose his words, as though certain memories carried more weight than he was willing to share. "You seem surprisingly patient," Emily said eventually. "Most people would have given up after 20 minutes. For the first time that evening, Ethan looked away. His gaze drifted toward the falling snow beyond the glass. A quiet expression crossed his face, one that suggested he was remembering something far away. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. "Years ago, my mother taught me something important," he said. "She believed that leaving too quickly can make you miss the reason someone needed more time." Emily felt an unexpected tug of curiosity. There was clearly more to the story, but Ethan did not elaborate. Instead, he smiled and asked her another question about Lily. Yet as the evening continued, Emily could not stop wondering what experience had taught him that lesson, and why the memory still seemed to affect him all these years later. The evening seemed to pass faster after that. Whatever nervousness Emily had carried into the restaurant slowly faded beneath the warmth of easy conversation. She had expected awkward pauses, forced smiles, and polite excuses to end the night early. Instead, she found herself talking to Ethan as if they had known each other much longer than a few hours. The Christmas music drifting softly through the restaurant blended with the quiet hum of conversations around them, creating a sense of comfort she had not experienced in a long time. For once, she was not thinking about work deadlines, grocery budgets, or the endless responsibilities waiting for her at home. She was simply enjoying the moment. Ethan asked thoughtful questions and never interrupted. When Emily spoke about raising Lily alone, he listened carefully. He did not offer pity or empty compliments. He simply respected the challenges she described. That alone made him different from most people she had met. Many saw a single mother and immediately assumed they understood her life. Ethan never made assumptions. As the server cleared their dinner plates, Emily realized she was smiling more than she had in months. "You know," she said, laughing softly, "my friend convinced me to come tonight. She was certain I would cancel at the last minute." Ethan smiled. "And did you almost cancel?" Emily shook her head. "Several times. I am glad you did not." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, snow continued falling in gentle waves beneath the glow of streetlights. The city seemed quieter now, as if Christmas Eve itself was settling into a peaceful rhythm. Ethan eventually told her a little more about himself. He mentioned that he traveled frequently for work and spent much of his time managing complicated projects. The description sounded demanding, but vague. Emily assumed he worked somewhere in corporate management. Nothing about him suggested extraordinary wealth or influence. In fact, he seemed surprisingly grounded. There were no stories about luxury vacations or expensive possessions. No attempts to impress her. If anything, he appeared more interested in hearing about Lily's school holiday concert than discussing his own career. As the evening continued, Emily found herself lowering defenses she had spent years building. It was a strange feeling, comfortable, yet unfamiliar. When she finally checked the time, she gasped. Nearly 3 hours had passed. "I cannot believe it is already this late," she said. "Mrs. Reynolds is probably spoiling Lily with Christmas cookies." Ethan laughed. "Then I should not keep you any longer." They stood and slowly made their way toward the entrance. Emily felt an unexpected disappointment that the evening was ending. Outside, cold winter air greeted them as they stepped onto the sidewalk. Snowflakes landed softly on her coat. For a few seconds, they simply stood there beneath the glow of holiday lights. Then Ethan offered a warm smile. "I would like to see you again, Emily." Her heart skipped slightly. Before she could answer, a black luxury sedan pulled smoothly to the curb beside them. A sharply dressed driver stepped out and opened the rear door. Emily stared in surprise. Ethan's expression changed almost imperceptibly, as though he suddenly remembered something he had hoped to avoid explaining. And for the first time that evening, Emily began to wonder if there was far more to Ethan Brooks than he had allowed her to see. Emily watched as the driver held the door open for Ethan. The luxury sedan gleamed beneath the Christmas lights, looking completely out of place among the ordinary cars parked along the street. For a moment, she wondered whether she had misunderstood everything about the man standing in front of her. Ethan seemed to notice the question forming in her eyes. He smiled awkwardly, almost as if he wished the car had arrived a few minutes later. "I know how this looks," he said. Emily laughed softly. "Honestly, I am not sure how it looks." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "Fair enough." There was a brief silence before he handed her a business card. "In case you decide you would like that second dinner." Emily accepted it and slipped it into her purse without looking at it. She was more focused on the warmth in his eyes than anything written on a card. After exchanging a final goodbye, she headed toward her car while Ethan stepped into the waiting sedan. The drive home felt strangely different from the drive there. Earlier, she had been anxious and frustrated. Now she kept replaying moments from the evening. His patience, his kindness, the way he listened. It had been years since she had enjoyed someone's company so naturally. When she arrived home, she found Lily asleep on the couch beneath a holiday blanket, while Mrs. Reynolds quietly watched television nearby. After thanking her neighbor and carrying Lily to bed, Emily finally changed into comfortable clothes and settled onto the sofa. Her purse slipped from her shoulder, landing beside her. That was when she remembered the business card. Curious, she pulled it out and turned it over. The moment she read the name beneath Ethan's, her heartbeat stopped. Ethan Brooks, Chief Executive Officer, Brooks Global Technologies. Emily stared at the card in disbelief. The company name sounded familiar. Very familiar. She grabbed her phone and typed it into a search engine. Within seconds, dozens of articles appeared. Business magazines, financial websites, interviews, conference appearances. Her eyes widened as photograph after photograph appeared on the screen. It was him, the same man who had spent 3 hours talking with her about Christmas memories and elementary school concerts. The same man who had waited nearly an hour for a late blind date. Except according to the articles, he was also one of the most successful business leaders in the country. One headline described him as a billionaire entrepreneur. Another featured him on a list of the most influential executives in America. Emily slowly lowered her phone. None of it made sense. During dinner, Ethan had never mentioned any of it. Not once. He had spoken about work so casually that she assumed he was a mid-level manager somewhere. Why would someone like him hide something so significant? And more importantly, why would someone like him be interested in someone like her? Emily glanced around her small living room. Children's books sat stacked beside the couch. A few Christmas decorations decorated the shelves. Everything about her life was ordinary, practical, modest. She thought about the worlds they seemed to belong to and suddenly felt a knot form in her stomach. Maybe the evening had felt magical because she had not known the truth. Maybe things looked different now. Yet despite every logical reason to pull away, Emily found herself opening her phone and looking once more at Ethan's photograph on the screen, wondering why a man who appeared to have everything had chosen to spend Christmas Eve with her. The days after Christmas passed more slowly than Emily expected. She told herself she was being practical, sensible, realistic. Yet every time she picked up her phone and saw Ethan's number, she hesitated. Part of her wanted to call him. Another part insisted it would be better to leave the memory exactly where it was. A beautiful evening. Nothing more. The more she learned about Ethan Brooks, the more impossible the situation seemed. During lunch breaks at work, she occasionally saw his name appear in business articles shared by coworkers. New company acquisitions, industry awards, charity events. His world seemed filled with private jets, executive meetings, and people whose lives looked nothing like hers. Meanwhile, Emily spent her mornings packing school lunches and her evenings helping Lily with homework at the kitchen table. The difference between their lives felt enormous. One afternoon, her friend Megan noticed her staring at her phone. "You still have not called him back, have you?" Emily sighed. "No." Megan looked shocked. "Emily, that man waited almost an hour for you. That was before I knew who he was. And what exactly does that change?" Emily struggled to explain it. "Everything. People like Ethan do not date people like me." Megan laughed. "You mean kind people?" Emily rolled her eyes, but the comment stayed with her long after the conversation ended. That evening, after putting Lily to bed, Emily sat alone in her living room and reread the brief message Ethan had sent 2 days earlier. "I enjoyed meeting you. I hope Lily is feeling better. No pressure, but I would love to see you again sometime." The message was simple, thoughtful, There was nothing arrogant or demanding about it. Still, Emily never replied. Days turned into a week. Then another. She convinced herself she was doing the right thing. If she created distance now, neither of them would get hurt later. Yet despite her efforts, Ethan seemed to appear everywhere. A magazine cover at the grocery store. An interview playing silently on a television in a waiting room. Even Lily accidentally mentioned him one evening. "Is that the nice man from your Christmas dinner?" she asked while pointing at a photograph on Emily's phone. Emily quickly locked the screen. "Just someone I met." Lily studied her mother carefully. "You smiled when you said that." Emily laughed despite herself. Children always notice things adults try to hide. Late one Friday afternoon, as Emily prepared to leave work, her phone buzzed again. She expected a reminder from Lily's school or perhaps a message from Megan. Instead, she saw Ethan's name. Her heart immediately raced. The message contained only one sentence. "I understand if you are not interested, but I hope you know I never saw you as someone outside my world." Emily stared at the screen for several seconds. Somehow, it felt as though he had heard every fear she had been carrying. For the first time since Christmas Eve, she began to wonder if perhaps the distance between their worlds existed more in her mind than in reality. But before she could decide whether to answer, a new headline about Ethan appeared on her screen, and what she read next made her question everything all over again. The headline stopped Emily cold. According to the article, Ethan had just donated millions of dollars to expand community education programs across several states. What surprised her was not the amount. It was the photograph attached to the story. Instead of standing beside executives or celebrities, Ethan was sitting on the floor of an elementary school library surrounded by children. He looked exactly like the man she had met on Christmas Eve. Relaxed, approachable, genuine. Yet Emily still could not bring herself to answer his message. She locked her phone and slipped it into her purse. The following Saturday morning, she took Lily to a community winter festival held at a local recreation center. The event featured crafts, games, and a small indoor farmer's market. Lily had been looking forward to it all week. For the first hour, everything felt normal. Emily helped Lily decorate a paper snowflake, sampled hot chocolate from a local vendor, and almost forgot about Ethan entirely. Then Lily suddenly tugged on her sleeve. "Mom," she whispered excitedly. "That is the nice man from your picture." Emily turned and froze. Standing near a table filled with donated books was Ethan. He wore jeans, a simple sweater, and a baseball cap. Without the business suits from magazine covers, he looked surprisingly ordinary. Before Emily could decide whether to approach him, Lily was already waving enthusiastically. Ethan noticed them and smiled. A moment later, he walked over. "Emily," he said warmly. "What a surprise." Emily laughed nervously. "I think I could say the same thing." Ethan glanced at Lily. "And you must be Lily." The little girl nodded. "Mom talks about you." Emily immediately looked horrified. "Not helping Lily." Ethan laughed. "I will take that as a good sign." What happened next surprised Emily even more. Ethan knelt to Lily's eye level and asked about the craft project she was carrying. Within minutes, the two of them were discussing favorite books, cartoons, and holiday cookies as though they had known each other for years. There was no awkwardness, no attempt to impress. Ethan treated Lily with the same respect he showed everyone else. As they walked through the festival together, Emily watched her daughter slowly relax around him. That was not something Lily did easily. Since becoming a single parent, Emily had been careful about who entered their lives. Lily was friendly, but cautious. Yet somehow Ethan seemed to earn her trust naturally. At one booth, Lily won a small stuffed snowman after completing a simple game. She immediately showed it to Ethan. "His name is Marshmallow," she declared proudly. Ethan nodded seriously. "Excellent choice." Lily giggled. Emily found herself smiling. For the first time, she could picture Ethan as part of a normal afternoon rather than a distant figure from a business magazine. As the festival began winding down, Ethan turned toward Emily. "I am glad I ran into you today." Before she could respond, Lily looked up at him and asked an innocent question. "Are you coming to my school concert next month?" The question caught both adults completely off guard, and Emily suddenly realized the answer mattered far more than she expected. For a moment, neither Emily nor Ethan knew how to answer Lily's question. The little girl looked from one adult to the other, completely unaware of the emotions her innocent words had stirred. Ethan recovered first. He smiled gently. "That depends," he said. "Do you think I would be welcome?" Lily nodded immediately. Of course, my class is singing 3 songs. We practiced for weeks. Ethan placed a hand over his heart. Then I would be honored to attend. The excitement on Lily's face made Emily unexpectedly happy. As they said goodbye outside the recreation center, Ethan and Emily exchanged numbers again, this time without hesitation. Over the following weeks, they slowly began talking more often. Sometimes it was a quick text message about work. Sometimes it was a photograph of Marshmallow the stuffed snowman appearing in increasingly strange places around Emily's apartment. Other times, it was a simple conversation that lasted far longer than either of them intended. The more Emily learned about Ethan, the more complicated her feelings became. He remained thoughtful and kind, yet she could never completely forget the enormous difference between their lives. Then one evening, everything changed. Emily had just finished cleaning up dinner when Megan called. Her voice sounded unusually serious. "Have you seen the news?" she asked. Emily immediately felt a knot form in her stomach. "What news?" "It is about Ethan." Emily opened her phone and searched his name. Within seconds, a flood of articles appeared. One headline stood out above all the others. According to multiple reports, Ethan had attended a high-profile charity gala the previous night alongside a woman named Victoria Langford. Emily clicked on the article. Several photographs filled the screen. Victoria was elegant, confident, and beautiful. The article described her as a successful business executive and longtime acquaintance of Ethan's family. More importantly, the writer openly speculated that the two might be rekindling a past relationship. Emily stared at the images longer than she should have. Rationally, she knew gossip articles were often unreliable. Emotionally, however, the photographs hit hard. Victoria looked like someone who belonged in Ethan's world. Someone who understood executive boardrooms, international travel, and luxury events. Someone who would never feel out of place standing beside him. Over the next few days, similar stories continued appearing online. Some publications referred to Victoria as Ethan's former girlfriend. Others claimed they had remained close for years. Emily tried to ignore the headlines, but they seemed impossible to escape. At work, coworkers discussed the story. At the grocery store, she spotted another magazine featuring their photograph. By the time Ethan called one evening, Emily found herself hesitating before answering. Their conversation remained friendly, but something had changed. A distance had quietly entered her voice. Ethan seemed to notice immediately. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Emily looked toward the living room where Lily was coloring pictures at the coffee table. "Yes," she replied softly. But even as she said the words, she knew they were not true. For the first time since Christmas Eve, Emily found herself wondering whether she had been foolish to believe there was ever a place for her in Ethan's life, and she had no idea that the truth behind Victoria was far different from what the headlines wanted everyone to believe. The following week felt longer than any Emily could remember. She continued speaking with Ethan, but carefully, politely. Every conversation stayed near the surface. Whenever he suggested meeting for coffee or dinner, she found a reason to postpone. Ethan never pushed, yet she could sense his growing confusion. He knew something had changed. He simply did not know why. Then Lily's school concert arrived. The elementary school auditorium buzzed with excited parents carrying cameras and flowers. Emily helped Lily straighten her holiday dress before leading her backstage with the other children. As she walked back toward the audience, she noticed an empty seat beside her. A small part of her wondered whether Ethan would actually come. He had a company to run. Important people depending on him. Perhaps attending a children's concert was not realistic. Then, just minutes before the performance began, Ethan appeared. He slipped quietly into the seat beside her, wearing a simple dark jacket and carrying no sign of the status the world associated with him. "I made it," he said with a smile. Emily felt unexpectedly relieved. "You did." Moments later, the concert started. For nearly an hour, children sang holiday songs, missed cues, waved at parents, and filled the room with cheerful chaos. Throughout the performance, Ethan seemed completely focused on the stage. When Lily's class appeared, he applauded as enthusiastically as any proud parent. Emily caught herself watching him several times. There was something genuine about the way he showed up for people. Not because cameras were present. Not because anyone expected it. Simply because he cared. After the concert ended, families gathered in the lobby. Lily immediately ran toward them. "Did you see me?" she asked excitedly. "You were amazing," Ethan replied. Lily beamed. Then she rushed off to show her friends the stuffed snowman still tucked beneath her arm. As Emily watched her disappear into the crowd, Ethan finally turned toward her. "I miss talking to you," he said quietly. The honesty in his voice left little room for avoidance. Emily looked down. "Ethan." He waited patiently. "Is this about Victoria?" he asked. Emily's eyes widened. Ethan released a small sigh. "I was hoping it was not." For the first time, Emily admitted what had been bothering her. The articles, the photographs, the rumors, everything. Ethan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he shook his head. "Victoria and I dated briefly years ago. We realized we were better as friends. That has never changed." Emily searched his face for any sign of uncertainty. There was none. "The gala was business-related," he continued. "The headlines were written by people who needed a story." For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Ethan looked directly at her. "Emily, do you know why? I waited for you that night." The question caught her off guard. Before she could answer, his expression softened. "Many years ago, my mother was left alone on Christmas Eve. Someone decided she was not worth waiting for. She never forgot that feeling. Before she passed away, she told me something I have carried ever since. She said that sometimes people arrive late because life is harder than anyone can see. Since then, I promised myself I would always wait long enough to learn the reason." Emily felt tears sting her eyes as the final piece finally fell into place. Emily stood quietly in the school lobby as Ethan's words settled into her heart. Suddenly, everything made sense. The patience he had shown on Christmas Eve, the kindness that never seemed forced, the way he listened before judging. It had never been about perfect timing. It had always been about understanding people beyond their circumstances. For the first time in weeks, the distance Emily had created between them began to disappear. She looked at Ethan and smiled through tears she could no longer hide. "I am sorry," she said softly. "I spent so much time convincing myself that we came from different worlds that I never stopped to ask whether that mattered to you." Ethan returned her smile. "It never did." From that day forward, things changed naturally. There was no dramatic declaration and no fairy tale transformation overnight. Instead, there were ordinary moments that slowly became extraordinary because they were shared together. Ethan attended Lily's soccer games on chilly Saturday mornings. He joined them for simple dinners where conversations centered around school projects and favorite movies. He learned how Lily liked her pancakes shaped like animals and how Emily always drank coffee that had grown cold because she was too busy taking care of everyone else. The more time they spent together, the more Emily realized that Ethan's success was the least interesting thing about him. What mattered was his character. What mattered was that he always showed up. Months passed. Spring turned into summer, and summer eventually gave way to autumn. By the time the holiday season returned, Ethan had become an important part of both Emily's and Lily's lives. One snowy evening in December, nearly a year after their first meeting, Ethan invited them to a Christmas celebration at a community center his foundation supported. Children filled the building with laughter, while volunteers distributed gifts and meals to families. Emily watched Ethan move through the crowd, greeting people by name and stopping to speak with every child who wanted his attention. It was the same man she had met that first night, the same man who had waited. Later that evening, after the event ended, the three of them stepped outside into gently falling snow. Christmas lights stretched across the town square, casting a warm glow over everything. Lily stood between them holding Marshmallow, who looked considerably older after a year of adventures. Then she suddenly grinned and pulled something from her coat pocket. "Mr. Ethan told me I had an important job tonight," she announced proudly. Before Emily could ask what she meant, Lily handed a small velvet box to Ethan. Ethan took a slow breath and turned toward Emily. His eyes reflected the lights surrounding them. "The best thing that ever happened to me began with someone arriving late," he said quietly. "And every day since then has been worth the wait." He opened the box, revealing a simple ring. Emily covered her mouth as emotion rushed through her. "Emily Carter, will you marry me?" For a brief moment, the world seemed perfectly still. Then she nodded. "Yes." Lily cheered loudly enough to make nearby families turn and smile. As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, snow continued falling around them, and Emily realized that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of life begin when someone chooses not to walk away too soon.